Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think you guys make fun of me for saying that at this point, but I keep saying it. How you doing? It's Mr. Riderola here with another tutorial on characteristics of colonial government for your summary. And we are actually getting to characteristics of American government in this tutorial. So I'm on the last page, page 4. We'll finish this up. There's a few paragraphs there. We'll be all done. And we'll be able to move on. We'll be done with colonial government. So move right into it. Let's go. Okay, I always cover this before we begin, and I really don't want you to forget to do these things. I'll do it quick, but again, as you're reading, you should be making connections. Think about things you already know. Interactive text. Main idea, supporting details. What questions are being answered here? What problems are being solved? Keep that in mind. What's the sequence of events, right? And then clarify understanding with pictures, which I'll definitely do in this one. I have a great caption for this one. Okay, so I'm still using those skills. Just keep that in mind. Okay, after reading. Okay, we're going to recall. We're going to respond with your reflection section. We'll evaluate. I apologize, I'm getting over a cold. Okay, so we'll do that. And again, we will actually do a little evaluation with this one. I will be giving you a primary source analysis activity or DBQ activity at the end of this particular summary for you to work on. So we'll be getting to that. Okay, and once again, we're using our summary skills. Okay, we're deleting information we don't need, substituting information by changing things around when we have to, or when we need to. Okay, or keeping the most important information. Again, names, dates, policies, key places. Those tend to be things related to history that you want to keep in your summary. And again, we're using the outline format, breaking things down by topic, subtopic. We read paragraph by paragraph, and we summarize paragraph by paragraph. And let's get right into it. And again, I am on page 4, characteristics of American government. Okay, and we'll jump right into the reading. Okay, and this is Roman numeral 3. This reading had 3 Roman numerals, had 3 topics. Okay, it was rather short, but there were 3 of them. Right, our introduction actually has a name here. A is usually intro, but I actually gave it a name, types of colonies and impact of government. And let's get into it. I'm getting to that first paragraph. There were 2 main types of colonies in America: charter colonies and proprietary colonies. Charter colonies received a charter from the king, granting rights and privileges to settlers. Individuals directly owned proprietary colonies. By the way, there were definitions here for charter and proprietary if you looked real close. Just for a little clarification here, charter colonies have a charter. They have a contract from the king, and that contract gave them certain rights and privileges, and a person owned a proprietary. In fact, the word proprietary, it sounds like property, which it should. That's kind of the root of it, right? That's a colony owned by someone directly. Okay, so just breaking it down here, doing a little categorization. I'm going to consider that my during reading activity, if it'll help. So how do I summarize this? I think this one's pretty easy. 2 types of colonies: charter, right? What's a charter? Received charter from king, rights and privileges, and proprietary, owned by an individual. I should have something along those lines. So let's see what we got here. Yep, 2 types of colonies: charter, proprietary. Charter colonies, charter from king, grants rights and privileges, settlers. Proprietary colonies had landowners. Paragraph 1 is done. Okay, moving on. Paragraph 2. Charter colonies often had more rights and opportunities for self-government, while proprietary colonies developed self-government slowly because they need permission from property owners. I see a little contrast here, right? There's a difference between the 2, and I'll consider this my during reading strategy, right? So my charter colonies, since they kind of already had built-in rights, they quickly developed more, and those rights became part of the colony's actual existence. Where in a proprietary colony, they really had to wait till the property owner decided they could have rights. Okay, so it's almost a summary of it as well. When I break it down, there's paragraph 2. And you can see charter colonies, more rights, opportunities for self-government. Proprietary colonies, self-governed, slower to develop. Again, you need permission from the owner. So if you have something along those lines, notice these paragraphs are rather short. And because of that, I have just like a 1AB, 2AB. shorter paragraphs will be that way. Keep in mind, if you have an A, you need to have a B. That's just the regular format. If you don't have a B, I usually take A and break it into two ideas. So just keep it's just part of the outline format. If you have an A, you should have a B. So good to go. I mean, there's another one down, right? So moving on, next paragraph. Over time, some colonies became royal colonies, like Virginia, 1624, New York, 1685, New Hampshire, 1679, and Massachusetts, 1691. Okay, so I just list them. I mean, there you go. These seem to be in order, right? I mean, I see, Virginia, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. So they kind of fall in order. So I do see an order here, a pattern. There's my during reading strategy. Okay, some colonies became royal colonies, and I just listed them: Virginia, New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and so on. And there's the first three paragraphs here, but it wasn't so bad. But we really haven't answered the question what a royal colony is. So, hey, let's move to the next slide. Again, if you need to stop this and review, go for it, and then continue when you're ready. Okay. Oh, I did put up this comparison chart, and I wanted to point out that you'll note that, let me go back one, you'll note that not all the colonies became royal colonies. They did all go through this process. It was, it was kind of unusual. You see some of them here, right? Where there was some change. When did they become royal colonies? Okay, so the thing I wanted to point out in this chart, though, is that those not incorporated as royal colonies functioned like one, except under their initial charters or under a constitution approved by the proprietor. So often the property owner gave them approval, but they often functioned just like a royal colony. And I wanted to make that clear before we went on. You might ask, well, why weren't they all just royal colonies? And the reason why is because they already functioned like one. So there was they had no reason to go back and do it again. So that's kind of a little caveat here, or a little sidebar to note about the colony's initial existence. So continue on. There's two more paragraphs here for this subtopic, right? And moving on. Royal colonies were governed like smaller versions of the English government. A governor appointed by Parliament headed the government with the help of an upper house of advisors, while colonists elected representatives for a lower house. Conflicts often arose over, taxes and trade laws. So taxes and mercantilism, how about that? And again, notice I'm immediately making connections to things I already know. And when I look at this format, what does it remind me of? It reminds me of what we learned about the evolution of Parliament. For example, an upper house like the House of Lords in England, or a lower house like the House of Commons in England. So basically the structure that developed in England is used as a model for each colony. Now that's really interesting, right? I mean, they all adopted this structure. So royal colonies governed smaller versions of England. Basically said that. Had governor chosen by Parliament, led with help of upper house council advisors. Colonists elect reps, representatives. Lower house, conflicts over taxes and trade. Okay, and while a bit of a longer paragraph, I was still able to break that one down into just two. Last paragraph of the subtopic, local town meetings, where landowners passed laws and citizens voiced their concerns, guided community decisions. This allowed colonists to express their issues and start governing themselves, setting the stage for the American Revolution. So again, I've talked about town meetings once before, and again, we see these on TV even today. Often when politicians run for office, they'll have a town hall on TV where people from a local community will get together and ask questions of the person running for office. So this gives you an idea where that actually came from, and it came from this out of the local town meetings. So again, town meetings where landowners pass laws, citizens voice concerns, guide community decisions, colonists express issues, govern themselves, stage for revolution. And there you go, right? Town meetings, landowners pass laws, make decisions, led community. Express views, govern themselves, set stage for the American Revolution. So, I think I've talked about this before, and it's worth mentioning again here before we wrap up. But we saw how economically, when you look at the three regions of the colonies, New England with its transport routes, its vast trade network, the middle colonies with their food supply, with their natural resources, with their trade, and when you look at the South with its ability to export lots of cash crops, excuse me, you can see that there's a level of independence economically. The mercantilist system that's imposed upon the colonies is not liked, which was kind of alluded here in our fourth paragraph. Okay, so the colonies have the capability to be independent already economically, and now politically. I hope you get out of this particular lesson that the colonies also have the ability to be politically independent. So there's only one more thing we have to cover. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, are they socially independent? And the answer would be yes. So when we reach about 1750, you're looking at a system. You're looking at a system that's ready to be on its own. Well, why isn't it yet? So we'll see the catalyst of that. That's coming up. That's coming up, and we will talk about that very soon. Okay, and again, note here the organizational structure that we have in place, right? The king, with the help of parliament, chose a governor of the colony. Governors tended to administer based on the wishes of the king. So the royal governor is kind of like the king's direct person. So king and parliament would often decide who would be royal governors, and they would rule. The royal governor appointed an advisory council, an upper house, like the House of Lords in Britain. These councillors often worked on behalf of the governor, so they tended to agree with the governor all the time. And then you'd have the colonial assembly. Okay, and the assembly was elected from the citizens and acted as a lower house, like the House of Commons in Britain. These representatives spoke and acted on behalf of the people. The people did not always agree with the policies of the king. They didn't always agree with what the king wanted to do, especially when it came to taxes and trade. So already you can kind of see a contention or a contest going on, or a tug of war, if you want, between these two groups. So, hey, subtopic B. Who participated in colonial government? Okay, I'll get right into it. Colonists in America enjoyed more political freedom than those in England, but rights were not equal for everyone. Women had some rights, but fewer than free white males. Married women could not sign contracts or run businesses without their husband's approval. In the southern colonies, women could buy land and manage households, but their rights remained limited. So, okay, now we're seeing that participation. And we talked about this once before at Athens. It was just with males, and we see this is even true here in these colonies. Women did not have the same rights as men. And again, I've made my connections with Athens, right? So, colonists in America had more freedom than England, but not everyone was equal. Women had some rights, but fewer than free white males. Having trouble with the word rights and white. Okay, married women could not sign contracts, run businesses without husband's approval. Women actually in the South had more rights. Their husbands tended to be away, selling and trading goods. So they're actually giving more property rights than even women in New England or the middle colonies. So how did I summarize this one? There's a lot in this paragraph, so I apologize if the summary seems long. Colonists enjoyed much political freedom, much more than England, but not equal. Women had some rights, but fewer than males. Married women could not sign contracts or run business without their husband. Yes, ladies, believe it or not, that was true. Okay. In the South, they could buy land and manage the household, but their rights are still limited. So the South, where you think there'd actually be less rights, women actually had more because they were often left on the plantation alone for months at a time when their husband is away selling goods. Paragraph 2. African Americans and Native Americans had very few rights. The majority of enslaved African Americans were treated as property. Women, African Americans, and Native Americans could not vote. Okay, so now we know this. We already talked about slavery and the role Native Americans played. It's really not until 1924 that Native Americans even get the right to vote. And so I'm making connections here. Right. So, and the thing I noticed right away is that they don't have the same rights. African and Native Americans, few or no rights. Enslaved Africans were property. Women, African, Native Americans could not vote. Should point out to you that even free Africans or free African Americans who were freemen still were treated as second-class citizens, often could not vote, in fact could not vote for the most part, and were often segregated from the white communities. So that was even true before the concept of segregation existed. Something to keep in mind. And finally, let's wrap it up with this last paragraph. Colonists believed that British custom and law protected their individual rights. Because the colonies were so far from England, they experienced a policy called salutary neglect. We've talked about this before, meaning that the British did not strictly enforce laws. Colonists grew accustomed to such neglect by the government. The colonists appreciated this neglect because it allowed them to trade with all other nations without interference from the government. We talked about this when we talked about mercantilism. I remember, so I'm going back to that. There's this thing called salutary neglect. And remember, again, make connections. In England in the 1600s, it was really it was a really burning trash bin. It was that idea of a trash bin on fire heading down a river. It was a mess in England in the 1600s. And the colonies had a level of freedom that normally a colony would not be able to enjoy. Okay, so it's something to keep in mind. So let's summarize this out. Believed in British custom and law, protected their rights. Now that's important. We'll come back to that because colonists saw themselves as British. And they believed that the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights applied to them as much as it applied to anybody living in England. So keep that in mind. They experienced a lot of freedom because of salutary neglect. Laws were simply not enforced. And it allowed them to trade with others. So they're going to get used to this no interference thing until the 1750s. Actually the 1760s, when really Britain comes down on the colonies for enforcing the law. And now we're going to have a problem. So, and that's another story. So that's something we'll get to later. Hey, that wraps up, right? Characteristics of colonial government. Okay, check your outline over, complete your reflection activity, and you'll be ready to move on to the document analysis. So hope you enjoy that. Okay, with that, have a nice day. Thank you.